What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Black and Gold Breakdown. If you are new to the channel, be sure to do all that YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, leave a comment if you would like. And today, the topic of discussion, and really not just, for the show today, but over the last, I'd say 24 to 36 hours, has been the Steelers likely moving on from wide receiver George Pickens. And Noah Strackbine of All Steelers Sports Illustrated put out a report saying that a team source told him that that is the likely route, that they are looking to move on from Pickens and rebuild and reconstruct their wide receiving core as a whole. And I think that we could see something similar to what the Bills did this past offseason, where they move on from Stephon Diggs and they just bring in a bunch of new dudes, with the exception of one where Calvin Austin will be back next year. He's certainly earned that. Roman Wilson more than likely will be back. We haven't seen what he can do on a field yet at the NFL level, but I feel like he'll be back. But you look at everybody else, there's no reason for them to bring back a Van Jefferson. There's no reason for them to bring back, a Mike Williams, unless it's just for, pure depth. No reason to, bring back all these guys that are there. If you want to, Ben Skoranek is fine. He can stay because he's a really good teamer, a really good special teams guy. But overall, I expect the Steelers to just go completely in a new direction with the wide receivers room. And that starts with trading Pickens. So my thoughts on it, they should trade Pickens. But don't do it. Learn something from the Deontay Johnson situation. Don't trade him until you have somebody, at least one other guy, already under contract. Because then you're playing the exact same game you played last year, where you're going to reach out to different teams to try to get guys after you already moved on from one, and you may or may not get one. So make sure that you have somebody already under contract, at least one or two guys that you know can be your 1 and 2 before you move off Pickens, which I expect will be what they do. With Pickens, I wonder if it'll be a draft day trade. Similar, they did that with Martavis Bryant when they traded him to the Raiders. But we'll see. Regardless, I do think that he's played his last down as a Steeler, personally. So what comes next is just figuring out who they can get and who they can send Pickens to. In terms of who they can get, and I did a write-up on this for Behind the Steel Curtain in terms of my perfect offseason for them this offseason. There's a couple guys that they should try to get. One is Garrett Wilson from the Jets. He's expressed very much that he would, be welcome to a change of scenery, and I think a lot of that revolves around just the organizational shortcomings. This year was supposed to be a big year for them, and instead they go 5-12. So for a young player like that, I think that there's obvious frustrations. And if you can get a Garrett Wilson, then you absolutely should. And this is where Omar Khan and the Steelers can't be, hesitant to pull the trigger. If it takes a first-round pick to get Garrett Wilson, then they should do it, because if they don't, they're going to take a receiver in the first round anyway. So you may as well go and get a dude who you know is great and played at college with the guy who's more than likely going to be your quarterback this year. Him and Justin Fields played at Ohio State together. There's already going to be some semblance of chemistry there. So if you can get Garrett Wilson, get Garrett Wilson. Other guy that they should try to get, and they could probably get, Courtland Sutton from Denver, going into his final year of his current deal with the Broncos. The Steelers tried multiple times to trade for him last year. At least a source told me that, very close to the situation. They reached out both before and during the draft to try to get Sutton. They were told no both times. Sutton wanted a new deal last year. He ended up not holding out, and he showed up and he played, and obviously he had a really good season. But now he's going into the final year of his deal. And one would wonder, if the Broncos aren't going to extend him and give him a new deal, if he would want to go somewhere where he can get a little bit of a new extension, new deal, and get a little bit more money. The Steelers have the money if they wanted to give him a little bit of it, because he's coming off a really good year. And if you can get Garrett Wilson and Courtland Sutton, already your wide receiving room is doubly as good as what it was this past season at minimum. Because then you can go Garrett Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Calvin Austin in the slot. Roman Wilson also is a slot guy who can play a little bit on the outside. He did at Michigan. You can put Calvin Austin on the outside, but we've seen them try to do that. It just hasn't worked. He's better as a slot guy. He's too small to be a boundary receiver. But if you can do that, then you absolutely should. Now, in terms of where they would send Pickens, there's plenty of teams that need a vertical field stretcher who can catch just about anything that you give him a chance to catch. And again, I do want to make this clear. This isn't a thing about talent when it comes to Pickens. I think everybody knows that. He's incredibly talented. It's just all the other stuff. The constant drama, being late to meetings, being late for the Chiefs game, throwing tantrums on the field, going on social media rants. Like, I think that behind the scenes, they're probably just over it. Similar with what it was with Deontay Johnson. They're just over it. And so if that's the case, then yeah, you move Pickens for, I think a second round pick could be what they get, or maybe like a second round pick and a day 3 pick, like a 2 and a 6. If you can get that, then great. Especially if you already got at least one of Cortland Sutton and Garrett Wilson. And you can move them to one of several teams. That would make sense. The Commanders, I'm sure they would love somebody to complement Terry McLaurin. The Chargers, they got Ladd McConkey and a bunch of dudes. Like, that would be a big help for Justin Herbert in terms of the talent. I think one place where they would look at the talent and overlook everything else that would make sense just for it to happen would be Dallas. Because again, outside of CeeDee Lamb, like Brandon Cooks is fine, but he's also getting older. And I believe he's a free agent this offseason. And they need somebody to complement CeeDee Lamb. So that would be such a Dallas Cowboys move where they took in Terrell Owens after he became a problem in Philly. And he spent a lot of time there and had a lot of success there, but ultimately talked his way out of Dallas as well. So I could see them going that route and putting George Pickens alongside CeeDee Lamb with Dak Prescott. I could certainly see them going that route. Depending on what happens with the Dolphins, like if they move off Tyreek Hill and they want to bring in George Pickens to complement Jalen Waddle, I think that that's certainly a possibility as well. Or, I mean, if you're trading for Garrett Wilson or Cortland Sutton, maybe you just do a straight up player for player involved with the deal. You have like some draft picks thrown in as change, but the main components would be, all right, we'll give you Garrett Wilson for George Pickens. Maybe you throw in some draft picks as part of it, but that would be the main components of the deal. Same thing with Denver. All right, we'll give you George Pickens for Cortland Sutton. We'll throw in some draft picks. You throw in a draft pick or two, and then we'll get it done. Basically, have like pick swap type stuff with players involved. But there are plenty of places that would love to have the services of George Pickens. You send him to a place like the Giants, who outside of Malik Neighbors have nobody. Just nobody on that roster. I know it makes sense for the Giants because they're going to take a quarterback, whether that be Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, whomever it may be, and you want to surround them with talent. So if you can do that, I mean, from a talent standpoint, it makes sense. Now, there are plenty of teams that would love to have the talent of George Pickens, but are they going to have the coaching staff in place to keep him happy, keep him satisfied? Are they going to have the quarterback in place to keep him happy, keep him satisfied? Again, I think that Dallas is the team that would do it just because it's a very Cowboys move, if that makes sense. It's a very Jerry Jones move. Oh, big name players available who has issues when it comes to, keeping his head on his shoulders and, not doing stupid things. It's not like legal stuff. It's just like constant drama stuff that divides the locker room and drives people insane. Same thing with T.O. From what I recall, T.O. never had any sort of legal troubles. He was just a pain in the ass. Great player, but a pain in the ass. And so I could see Jerry Jones going that route again, seeing a big name player like George Pickens available, giving up a second round pick. You might be able to talk Jerry Jones into giving you a 1 for George Pickens. You might. But at minimum, I think you can get a 2 for George Pickens and maybe a day 3 pick thrown in. If you're the Steelers, you take that. And again, going back to loading up on a new receiving room, let's say that you acquire Garrett Wilson from the Jets and you give up, a first for him, or, give up your own second and a day 3 pick, but then you get a 2 and a day 3 back. Then you can turn around to Denver and be like, hey, we'll give you a third and a day 3 for Cortland Sutton and parlay that into another receiver. Like, there's many ways that they can go about building this new receiving room. There's going to be some quality free agents as well. If they can go about getting Wilson, Sutton, and then maybe sign a Darius Slayton for some depth, have Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson right there, that receiving room is quite literally 1,000 times better than what they had in 2024. You got 2 legit dudes on the outside with Wilson and Sutton. You got some quality depth in Darius Slayton, Calvin Austin in the slot, and you drafted Roman Wilson with the hopes that he could be a focal player going forward. We'll see if that ends up being the case. But right there, you got 5 guys that you can legit rely on. At minimum 4, because we don't know with Roman Wilson. But if you got 4 guys, and this goes back to putting whoever the quarterback is in 2025 in position to succeed. And if it's going to be Justin Fields, which I think and many people believe it's going to be, surround him with as many weapons as possible. So there's no way that there can be the excuse of, well, he didn't have a lot of help. He's going to have a lot of help. He's going to have a solid offensive line in front of him. Going to have Jaylen Warren in the backfield with somebody, whoever it may be. There is not going to be any excuses if he fails. You're going to know one way or the other if he's the guy. If he goes out there and plays well, let's say he throws for 23 touchdowns, runs for 7 more, then yeah, you're like, damn, we got a dude. Got to give him a little bit of help, but just because he's not Josh Allen doesn't mean he's not good. You just got to put him in the right situation. You got to give him certain guys. And by the way, if you're out there looking for Josh Allen, you're going to be looking forever because you're not going to find guys of that tier more than likely. You're not going to find a Mahomes and Allen and Lamar. You're not going to find that. But what you can do is find the next best thing, a dude who's incredibly gifted athletically, who has a big arm, and can succeed as long as he has pieces around him. He's not going to drag you to the playoffs by himself. But even last year, Justin Fields played well in the 6 games that he started with limited weapons. So if you give him good weapons, combined with the fact that he can run, I could see them having a solid, successful season. Does it mean I think they're going to win the Super Bowl? No. But that's not what the standard is right now, unfortunately. We have to be realistic about this as well. And I've said, after the playoff game, they should probably just blow it up and start rebuilding. But we know they aren't going to do that. So we have to, project what can happen with the information that we have and what we know is going to happen versus what we know won't. So if they're going to try to, remain competitive, then you better go all in with it. Don't just make half-assed moves. Don't build half-ass offenses. If you're going to say you're willing to change, then show it. This is the second straight offseason. Mike Tomlin talked about, I'm willing to change. Well, you better start proving it and go balls to the wall and get guys that are worth getting in the offense. Get Justin Fields a guy who he's played with before in Garrett Wilson. Get him a solid deep threat in Cortland Sutton. Sign some reliable depth. Again, it doesn't have to be Darius Slayton, but somebody Darius Slayton-esque. Got Calvin Austin. Get another running back, whether that be in the draft. Like if Cam Scatterbo's there from Arizona State and you compare him with Jaylen Warren, I think that would be pretty fun. Javonte Williams is going to be a free agent. If you want to sign him to be the number 2, great. I do think that the ship has sailed on Najee Harris, though. I think the money that he is going to want, the Steelers aren't going to pay. I think he's probably going to want around 9.5 to 10 a year. The Steelers aren't going to give him that. And frankly speaking, don't think they should. Everybody talks about the 1,000-yard back every year thing. You got to average 50 yards a game to get 1,000 yards in today's NFL. It's great that he stays healthy, but he's not an incredible back. He's perfectly fine. He's not great. He's not bad. He is just a fine running back. I wouldn't give him $10 million a year either. So whoever that running back to complement Jaylen Warren is going to be, you can get him for much cheaper and have around. I mean, look, The success that they had on the run game this year wasn't great anyway. They weren't efficient. They had a lot of yards, but it was by volume, not efficiency. So you can get somebody for cheaper and have at minimum the same ground game that you had in 2024. Point being, though, is that you can surround Justin Fields with a lot of talent. They have the capability to do it. They're going into this offseason with roughly $56 million in cap space. They can free up almost 20 more by letting go of the likes of Larry Ogunjobi, Cole Holcomb, Preston Smith. There's guys that they can let go of and save a ton of money on, and then replenish that by bringing in offensive firepower. Yeah, they got to add stuff to the defensive interior, but as long as Cam and Benton are there, that part is going to be mostly fine. We saw, they brought in a guy, like Dean Lowry this past year. If he takes a starting role, then okay. You got Cam and Benton in there for the most part. That's perfectly fine. The moves they got to make on the defensive interior are depth stuff for now. So we've seen them take approaches of building defense. And the defense, frankly speaking, is terrible down the stretch and in the playoffs. You cannot build teams like it's 2007. You can't expect to have, a big name defense that'll carry you to a Super Bowl. You're not going to do that in today's NFL, especially not in the AFC, where you got to go up against Mahomes and Allen and Lamar and Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence and Justin Herbert. All these great quarterbacks that are going to put up points regardless of who they play. And you're just sitting there with your thumb up your ass with no offensive firepower because you think it's 2006 and you can win with just defense. If Mike Tomlin wants to show, hey, I can be different, go get offensive guys. Don't half-ass your receiver room with George Pickens and a bunch of dudes. Get aggressive, which, by the way, we know Omar Khan will be aggressive. And Mike Tomlin, they showed last year, and credit to them, they showed last year that they'll be aggressive, but you got to keep doing it. You can't just do it one off season and, pat yourself on the back for it. If you are going to trade Pickens, which again, I do think they are going to do, then load up on receivers, load up on talent, put Justin Fields in the best possible situation he can be to succeed. And you'll know one way or the other if he's the guy going into 2026. And if he's not, then you got a bunch of weapons there for whoever the guy will be. And when the time comes, at least you'll know. So we'll see what happens. I do think Pickens gets traded, and if they do that, then they got to load up offensively. So thank you guys for watching. Again, if you're not already subscribed, please do so. For more Steelers videos, go watch the most recent episode of The Pump Fake. Me and my buddy Matt Verderam from Sports Illustrated preview the divisional round. That was a very fun show. And yeah, like I said, if you're not already subscribed, please do so for more Steelers videos, more NFL videos. And we'll keep talking about this throughout the offseason, man. So we'll see what the Steelers end up doing. And when they do make a move, whatever that move may be, I will be here to discuss it with you right here on Black and Gold Breakdown. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Do all that YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, comment. I will see you in the next video. Have a good one.